as the name implies, the first thing it's a hash function. And by hash function, I basically mean that it will take input. It's a mathematical function, a transformation, if you will, that takes a particular input, and then we call this input a message. Okay, and the message can be of arbitrary length. And the hash function basically applies a mathematical transformation, maybe a set of mathematical transformations to this input to produce a single output. We typically call this output a digest, although sometimes you will see the output referred to as a tag or as a hash or as a fingerprint, but digest is sort of the most common nomenclature. In fact, MD5, which was one of the earlier hash functions, stands for message digest 5. Okay, and MD4 was message digest 4, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, the message, as I mentioned briefly, can be of arbitrary size. It can be as long as you want or as short as you want. But the output, the size of the digest or the size of the tag is going to be fixed in length. And for example, in the context of a hash function like, let's say, SHA-256, the digest will actually be exactly 256 bits in length. Okay, so it's going to have a fixed length output, but an arbitrary length input. Okay. And the other thing I want to point out about these cryptographic hash functions is that the function here is a deterministic function, and by that I mean that the output will always be the same for a given input. So if you have a given input, you're going to see the exact same output. You won't have a situation in which maybe a given input will have two different possible outputs. It's going to be consistent. Okay. Now traditional hash functions that have been used in computer science for quite some time, and they are used in many computing applications. So for example, you may have heard of something like a hash function used in something called a hash table. But the kinds of hash functions that are used in hash tables, and I want to stress this, they aren't necessarily the same as cryptographic hash functions, okay? The qualifier of cryptographic is very, very important, and it usually means or implies that hash function has to have a certain set of critical design goals and maybe some particular properties in mind that make it suitable for use in applications that use cryptography, perhaps security, privacy, confidentiality, so first and foremost, I'm going to be describing some of these properties. Maybe this almost goes without saying. One of the first properties you want is computationally efficient. By that I mean it takes a lot of time to compute the output from the input. You're given a message, you want to apply this set of transformations to that message. Again, that set of transformations should not take a long time. It almost goes without saying, but I think it is important to stress it. Now, whose corresponding digest is identical. And this property is typically referred to as collision resistance. Okay, that means it's hard to find a colliding pair of inputs. So in other words, if you have two inputs, and let's say you have some message M1 and you have a message M2, okay, their output under the application of the hash function should not be the same. You won't ever have it be the same. You won't ever have it be the case, rather, that the output of M1 and M2 under an application of the hash function is the same. They should never be the same. It should always be different. Okay. Now, I should take a step back here and point out that, of course, in practice, given that messages can be of arbitrary size, and given that the input, or the output rather, is a fixed size, it's not mathematically possible to guarantee that the output will always be different for two distinct messages. But what you typically want is not that the outputs are necessarily different, but that it's hard to find two distinct messages that produce the same output. We know that they exist by virtue of the fact that there are many messages that can be hashed in only a finite and small number, or a relatively small number compared to the number of messages, a smaller number of possible digest values. But aside from that consideration, it should be hard. It should take a long time, and by long I mean an astronomically long time to find two distinct messages that would result in the same output under the application of the hash function. Okay? Now, the third thing I want to point out is that in many cases, you might want also, in the context of a hash function, for the hash function to be able to hide information about the inputs. In other words, given the output, it should be hard to glean anything useful or interesting about the input. Okay? Any relevant detail, and I don't just mean the whole input, but maybe something that's input an even number or an odd number. That should be the kind of thing that should be hard to infer when you see the output. To them, such that the output looks, for all intents and purposes, completely random and unrelated to the original input. Okay? Now, I do want to make a few quick remarks about these particular properties, and first of all, they are interrelated. For example, if you have a situation where the outputs, let's say, really appear to bear no relationship with the input, and the outputs also look random, then that'll in fact give you, to a large degree, a lot of the collision resistance properties. Because just the fact that you can't predict the output and the fact that it hides all this information implies that it's going to be hard to find two inputs that are distinct and not. So sometimes you get one property in exchange for the others. And the second thing I want to point out is that two properties ways to describe these underlying properties. But my hope instead is that this video gives you maybe a bit of a flavor for what is required of a cryptographic hash function without maybe getting bogged down in some of the mathematical minutiae and formalism.
Or of many other Eastern sages that you see are seated like this. This figure of Buddha is in the posture of meditation, and the way in which he is seated and the whole cast of his features and of his expression symbolize a certain attitude to life, a certain way of looking things, which in Indian and Chinese philosophy is considered essential to sanity. Perhaps I can give you some idea of the meaning of this attitude by demonstrating it with a Chinese character, a word which represents this whole attitude to life. Most of you probably know that Chinese characters are originally picture writing. And in this particular character, this half of the character is said originally to have represented some water bird, perhaps a sloth or a peregrine. And this other part of the character is first of all a sign meaning the human eye. And then you put legs on it, the activity of the eye. and that means seeing. And the whole character is pronounced guan. And it means a certain kind of observation, a certain way of looking at things which might be typified by the image of a heron standing at the edge of the water, as in this painting, which is by the great Japanese artist Tano Motonobu. There is the heron standing quiet and serene, watching the water. And so, the whole meaning of this attitude to life is what is summed up in the entire Eastern idea of meditation, typified in these Buddha figures. And I want to try today to explain to you something of the meaning of this attitude to life. For fundamentally, meditation is not so much an exercise as it is a certain way of using one's mind or one's consciousness. Because normally, most human beings, when they use their eyes or their ears, are constantly and chronically straining to see and to hear. And when you come to think of it, that's very odd, because our eyes don't work by effort. They don't have to go out and get the light. The light comes to them. And in the same way, sound comes to our ears. And even the sense of touch comes to our fingertips. We don't, for example, have to press a thing hard. If I want in the dark, I'm trying to fumble and feel what this is. I don't have to press very hard to feel, because the sensation simply of the hard object comes to the nerve end in my skin. And so it's strange, isn't it, that we have acquired the habit of a constant and chronic effort to see clearly and to hear clearly. I think part of it comes from school. You know, when children are listening to a teacher in class, they're always doing or doing something like this, you know, around, and the teacher says, "Pay attention!" And the children immediately, to ingratiate the teacher, are able to sort of plan or act what paying attention is like. Paying attention is what is said. Yes, they're very attentive to what you say. Sometimes, to get their concentration clear, they curl up their legs around the legs of the chair and go into all these strange attitudes, so that the teacher knows they really are trying very hard to attend. And it is through such tradition, through being taught that we must try to hear in order to have clear sight and clear hearing, that we learn constantly to strain our senses in their use. But as a matter of fact, this impedes the clarity of our senses, because if you will try staring hard at a book in front of you, or staring very hard at the TV screen you're looking at right now, you'll find that it becomes fuzzy. Also, in the same way, if you're trying to listen, say, to a telephone conversation while the children are running all over the house and screaming, if you try to listen to the telephone, you'll get very angry and you'll have to stop to yell at the children to make them be quiet. But on the other hand, if you just let the sound come to your ears, you'll have difficulty hearing. So, you remember then that heron I showed you. When that heron was watching the fish, it wasn't so good. And as it were, the whole area of vision is simply coming to the heron. And the moment it sees a ripple in the water, it darts down. Now, I don't think it's over that we have been taught by teachers and parents and so on to try to see, try to hear clearly. There are other factors at work. And one of them is that while we are seeing and hearing, we are trying to make sense of our world by thinking about it. And the act of thinking also introduces an element of strain into the use of our minds. And I think the reason for this is, perhaps you will remember how I showed you on a previous program, that thought is linear. You know, it goes one word after another. It's strung out in a line. We think thought, 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 thought in a line like this, one after another. Whereas when we see to what is going on entirely. We take in a volume when we see. We take in a great area. Nature is a volume rather than something strung out in a line. But when we think, we get one thought after another, and so the process of thought is much slower than the process of seeing and using our consciousness or our mind as a whole. And this then requires a certain effort to make thought keep up with what we are seeing and what we are hearing. Also, you see, thought works by abstraction. What do I mean by abstraction? Well, a lot of Chinese characters are abstractions. If we take, for example, the Chinese character for man, it is written this way. Now, that was originally the head and legs of a human figure. Something, you know, like this, when we draw an abstract figure of a man. Everybody knows that's a man. But as a matter of fact, it cuts out a great deal of man. This figure cuts out all the details and gives us a simple image which we can grasp all at once. And we have to do that in order to think, so that we can use a series of very simple images or grasps of the world, and these are abstractions. It is fundamentally in terms of abstractions that we think. Now, thought, as I said, is slower because it goes in a line, thought after thought. And also thought is abstract. That is to say, it lacks the full living quality of real life, just as this figure here is just a sort of skeleton, ball on top of sticks, and therefore it lacks the vitality, the aliveness of a real man. Now, the more we tend to live in a world of thought, the more we tend to live in an abstract world that is removed from and has a gap between it and the real world of nature. And as a result of this, we tend to live in a world that is in some ways unsatisfied, lacking in vitality and life. And also, people tend to think all the time. This becomes, for every civilized community, every civilized person, a sort of pattern, which is like constantly talking to yourself. Now, of course, when you meet me here on the TV screen, I'm always talking, or almost always. But I assure you, I'm not always talking. I'm not talking, because after all, we have to be